So just a few days ago, we sat down and talked about the position group that, in my opinion, was most key for Alabama's defensive success in 2024. And not long after that, reports started surfacing about a name that we highlighted in that video turning heads during fall camp for the Crimson Tide. Well, today we need to talk about why this should be music to every Alabama fan's ears and talk about some names you need to know on the defensive side. But before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Y for yes, N for no. Do you believe LT Overton is going to have a big year for the Crimson Tide this season? Let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And as I alluded to in the intro, the name we are mainly talking about today is LT Overton, a guy who we highlighted among others just the other day in that defensive front video. But not long after that, I started going through Twitter, going through social media, and kept seeing report after report that LT Overton is turning heads, and during the scrimmage, that he was apparently incredibly disruptive. And that should excite every Alabama fan out there. Whenever we talk about LT Overton, in my opinion, it's a fascinating conversation. It's a fascinating story, and one that we're going to get into right now. This was a guy who reclassified, much like Ryan Williams did. He was the #1 player in the nation, reclassified, and then went to A&M, where they used him outside of the position that I think so many people who covered his recruiting process thought he would play at. Now, at the time, even though everyone had their questions about this, the one thing everyone acknowledged is this guy's a different level of athlete. So who knows? Maybe they see something and maybe he's going to go out there and absolutely dominate at this new position. At the end of the day, though he found some success there, I always couldn't help when watching but think, man, if they would have only kept him to the position that I believe he was destined to play, I think he could be having a monstrous season. That didn't end up happening at Texas A&M, though. And then he enters the transfer portal. And whenever he entered the transfer portal and Alabama ended up getting his commitment, I remember sitting here thinking, that is a massive win for the Crimson Tide. Getting guys such as a Damani Jackson and LT Overton to join in on this defense, that could pay dividends. Well, fast forward to where we are now, Damani Jackson looks to have locked up one cornerback spot, and now LT Overton is over here turning heads, and that's exactly what you want to hear. Because Alabama has moved him to his more natural position. And while it's not going to be a walk in the park completely seizing control of that position, because you have guys like Jamarian Latham who have also been very impressive, it is compelling and it is exciting to hear that a guy who hasn't been on campus for a year is excelling. A guy who really has undergone a body transition to get back in a position to be able to play that position is turning heads. LT Overton has so much athleticism, and he genuinely could be a catalyst for this defense. We talked the other day about the defensive front being a necessary part in order for the secondary to grow for Alabama. And if you have guys like LT Overton who are making the defense better, that's going to make the secondary better. If you can have the offense pull resources to LT Overton, everybody else on the defensive line, their jobs just got a little bit easier. And there are a few other names on the defensive line that I'm excited about. But this really goes into the conversation we had during that video where I said, hey, I think that there are going to be some names in this defensive front group that emerge as potential stars, or at least I hope so. Well, though we can't say LT Overton has gotten there yet, what we can say is it's encouraging to hear a transfer who had to transform his body turning heads in practice. I mean, you listen to the way Alabama's new defensive coordinator talked about LT Overton, and the excitement was palpable. You could tell that he has loved how fall camp has gone for the transfer defensive end. What Alabama is going to be able to do on their defensive line this year, to me, is so interesting because of all the names you have. Now it's just about which one of these names are going to step up and really become that household name that Alabama has previously had in the past. You have so much depth, but who's going to take that next step forward? Hearing that LT Overton is on his way to taking those steps, that is huge news for Alabama fans everywhere. But he's not the only one on this defense that's been impressing. Whenever we talk about Alabama's defense, you have guys such as Malachi Moore and Deontay Lawson, and they have been very impressive, but I think every Alabama fan expected that. They're veterans, they're senior presences on this defense, and they're the voice of the defense. How about a guy like a Zabian Brown, who has a cast on right now and is still proving every single day that he's going to be tough to keep off the field? Yes, he may be a true freshman. Yes, there's still a lot of learning, but we talked about this several times over here on the channel, and everywhere else they were talking about this. This wasn't something where just I was saying it and I'm looking for credit. That's not the case at all, and if it was framed that way when I said it, just know none of this is scripted. This is all off the top of my head. In fact, this is my notes for the video today. My take isn't that I had some clairvoyant knowledge. If you watched the All-American game with Zabian Brown as he was going up against Jeremiah Smith, they were both winning reps. Zabian Brown would win 2. Jeremiah Smith would win 2. Basically, it was an awesome battle. And whenever you're talking about that level of wide receiver, to be able to even have that battle only proved what an elite prospect Zabian Brown was. But during the course of that game, and the reason why I give that to you and point your attention that way, is that the broadcast booth was stating, hey, this Zabian Brown kid, probably the most technically ready defensive back in the class. The most college-ready defensive back, and he did so as a 5-star. So the upside is there, and he is a guy with a very high ceiling, but also an incredibly high floor. And that's something you love to see. Those guys who can come in, and you don't have to spend a whole lot of time teaching them. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think we expect most freshmen to be in the classification of, hey, you need to sit and learn. And that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly natural. Zabian Brown was one of those guys who had the benefit of going to a modern day where he received elite coaching, where he was in a division where he was going up against college football players, elite prospects. He was practicing against elite prospects who will be playing college football. Iron sharpens iron. And these guys from modern day, these guys from some of these areas in Texas, from IMG, from the DC area, they experience a different level of competition in practice and week in, week out. And that level of competition helps propel them once they get to the spotlight. And Zabian Brown looks like he's well on his way to being firmly in the spotlight. Now, as this is a defensive video, I'm not going to go over the offensive names that are turning heads. We'll leave that for a different day. But there is another name I wanted to talk about very briefly, and I talked about him before, and I'm not going to go into the whole soliloquy once again, but that's Jalen Mbakwe. I made a video when I was in Virginia visiting my family about Zabian Brown, Jalen Mbakwe, and my take was simple. Mbakwe doesn't surprise me in the slightest that he is making such strident steps forward in fall camp, and I would expect a guy like Noah Carter, you hear a similar sentiment with him as the football season comes in. That he is really starting to take off. Why is simple? Because those two guys did everything in high school. I made a joke on a stream the other day. I'm fairly certain Jalen Mbakwe and Noah Carter were the offensive coordinators, the defensive coordinators, the special teams coach. Fairly certain they were in charge of hydration, along with being the quarterback, running back, offensive line, defensive line, wide receiver, tight end. Obviously, I joke. But for those of you that know, you know those two guys did everything for their high school teams. Genuinely, they played like 7 different positions. And now they've settled in. Now they're getting college tutelage at one position. They already have a great understanding of the game of football. That's why they were able to excel at so many different positions. But now they're being coached at one. It's not going to take long for those type of guys to really start digesting what they're being told, the information given to them, and just take off. And hearing Jalen Mbakwe is having such a great fall camp is great news for Alabama fans because you have a cornerback room that, though inexperienced, is very talented. From Damani Jackson to Zabian Brown to Hurley to Deshaun Jones. Zay Mincy, Jalen Mbakwe. You've got the talent in that cornerback room. It's just all about getting the experience, and so far it sounds like fall camp has been an incredibly positive experience. Hop down to the comments, let me know some players that you're very excited about on the defensive side of the ball, and if I get enough of the same comment, we will break down that player and why they could have a massive year. Until next time, that's it. See ya.